Welcome, everyone, to this week's Fulbright Friday session. This meeting is going to be recorded for future reference and for anyone who's interested but couldn't attend today. Howdy, my name is Kyle Mox. I am the Associate Dean for National Scholarships here at ASU, and in that role, I am the official Fulbright Program Advisor for the university. And joining me today is our Assistant Director, Lori Stoff. Dr. Stoff, you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Laurie Stuff. I'm faculty mentor, assistant director, and Barrett faculty member. And I'm here to help you navigate the world of getting letters of recommendation from faculty members.
Yeah. And so this is a key topic, and as we'll get into it, you'll see exactly why this is so important. But we wanted to place this really early in the process because it's something I think that it's worth reflecting on and does take time to cultivate, right? And that's a word that we use with great intentionality that a lot of times I think applicants don't appreciate how much you can play a role in the process of producing a great letter of reference. Today we're going to be if I can get the slideshow to agree with me, that it's time to go. Uh, I recognize at least one name in the group here, and so I know some of you are familiar with Fulbright, but in case you're not, and if you're just new to Fulbright or you're just seeing this all for the first time, just know that the Fulbright program is the world's largest educational exchange fellowship program in the world. It's one of the oldest as well. It's been around since the 40s. It's a Department of State funded program, at least for the time being, and it provides over 2,000 grants per year, right? And so a lot of times I'll get questions from students like, oh, this is great. Is there anything else like Fulbright? And the answer is there's really not, right? Because the Fulbright program is so large and accessible and comprehensive. You can go to over 140 different countries worldwide, and you have such a wide range of options for what you can do with the grant, from engaging in ambassador and cultural exchange activities as an English teaching assistant through conducting research at a high level.
So it's really important for y'all to understand the main mission of Fulbright. So whatever grant award type you're going to be applying for, whether it be research or teaching English or doing an arts project or going to a graduate program, all of them have this one thing in common, and that is to meet this goal of fostering mutual cultural understanding and exchange. And that is really crucial. That is the whole point of the Fulbright program. So no matter what you're doing, you're going to want to convey clearly that this is something you want to engage in, that you're good at engaging. And importantly, you want to make sure your letters of recommendation or your recommendation forms, if you're doing the ETA program, will convey this as well, to show the Fulbright committee that you are good at engaging with people from other cultures, that you're able to understand their perspectives and engage respectfully and be a good representative of the United States.
So we're at the beginning stages of the application timeline. If you're able to attend Fulbright Day, that was our large kickoff event with panel discussion. I got a chance to meet with some alumni of the program. If you didn't get a chance to attend, that is available on our YouTube page as well. I recommend it, mainly because I was the main speaker. But the application is now open. It just opened for the next application cycle, which is for awards that will take place during the 2026-2027 academic year. So we're really at the left hand of the spectrum. And throughout April through the summer, we're doing our intake meetings and drafting application essays and getting all of our materials prepared. And then by September 9, we will be submitting a complete application, right? So you need to have your application finished by that point. And so letters of recommendation or the reference forms for ETA, that's one part that's a little bit out of your control because you're not the one writing those and you're beholden to somebody else. So thinking about this timeline, we very much want to get started early on this because that way we give a lot of time for our references to get around this. Working through summer is always a bit slow. Definitely not something we want to save for the right side of this.
So as we alluded to previously, there are different types of awards under the Fulbright rubric. There's the English Teaching Assistant Award, and these require 3 reference forms that have specific questions that your recommenders will have to fill out. Again, a lot of it having to do with things like your ability to be a good cultural ambassador, but also speaking to your ability to be a good teaching assistant, engage with students, and your basic kind of people skills. That's really a big part of what Fulbright is interested in. The other types of awards that are available are under the open study research category, but there are subcategories within those. There's a graduate degree award that will allow you to do graduate study in a degree granting program in another country. There's a creative and performing arts program that is that allows you to do something wonderful related to if you're studying to become a master musician, or if you're starting a particular art form, you can go work with somebody who is an expert in that. And then there are some country-specific awards that are related to certain fields, certain disciplines that are very unique and give you lots of great opportunities. Those three under the category of open study research will require more traditional types of letters of recommendation. But even in that case, we want to stress that these are not the kinds of things that you can recycle from another award opportunity, because the Fulbright Award is very unique in that it's looking not just for your qualifications and your ability to carry out the proposed program that you've written up, but also that you can be this good cultural ambassador. So please don't be tempted to just use a letter that somebody has written for another opportunity, because chances are that is not going to really do the trick for Fulbright.
Yeah, excellent advice here. So also know that these letters are submitted by your referees directly to the Fulbright application. And when we do the application walkthroughs with you, we'll show you exactly how that works. It's pretty self-explanatory. But yeah, sometimes we get, when I was coming out of college, I had professors say, hey, here's my letter of recommendation. You can use it for other things if you want to. Times are a little different then. That's not going to work in this particular case, because those transmission comes directly from the people you've listed on the application. They are confidential, and they should be confidential. And so we always insist that students or applicants waive their right to see their letters of recommendation. The application asks you to do that as well. And it's just a great insurance policy that your authors can feel free to say whatever comes to mind, and they don't have to self-edit or be worried about that. If they choose to share it with you later, that's entirely up to them, but it's not something you should expect. And there's an applicants tab on the Fulbright site, and under that, it does have a section that talks about letters of recommendation, and there's some good guidance there and additional specific instructions. But we also have information on our Canvas page for Fulbright, and once you get into the process and complete your second stage meeting, we'll give you access to that.
So it's really important also for you to remember that the reference components is just as important as all the other parts of your application. We really want you to think about who you will ask for these. You want to make sure that these are people who know you pretty well and can write, again, to the specific criteria that Fulbright is looking for. We're going to give you some advice on how to find the right people to write for you and how to approach those folks. But just thinking about how the references work together as a component of your application to support all of the other aspects of it. So in other words, the recommendation should speak to your abilities to carry out the proposed project or to be a good English teacher. It's really important in order to get the recommenders to be able to speak to that and to say what ways you will be good at what you say you're going to do, to provide them with a copy of your statement of grant purpose so they know exactly what you are going to propose to do. And then they can also speak about the things they know directly about you from observation that will help to support those claims. So you want to stress to them to bring in specific examples, things that you have done perhaps in their courses or perhaps in a role where you were working with them when they were your supervisor, or whatever it is that the capacity that you had the relationship with them, that they're speaking directly about the things that they've observed. If they can't say that they've observed those things directly, then again, you probably want to rethink who you're asking, or perhaps give them more information. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that in a moment.
So one of the things that applicants often ask are what are the criteria for Fulbright? And that's not such a clear-cut thing. There are no specific criteria for Fulbright as much as there are selection preferences. But in our time of working with Fulbright, I've been advising on Fulbright for about 20 years. Um, we can say with a great degree of certainty there are certain characteristics that make for a strong Fulbright applicant. The number one thing is flexibility and adaptability. And obviously, if you're going to go abroad to another country for an extended period of time, we would hope that you're open-minded, you've demonstrated some cultural awareness, because you'll be working independently or semi-independently. We would expect some leadership ability and initiative. And again, as a host, or excuse me, as a guest in your host country, we want to see you demonstrating respect for others, great humility, and curiosity about other cultures. So these are all great characteristics to manifest anyway. It's not easy. Nobody ever said it would be a easy thing to be away from home for that long. And so some resilience is great, as well as self-awareness and confidence. And I think probably the one thing that helps most of all is the sense of humor, right? So these are all, difficult things for you to write about in terms of yourself. You can convey some of these things in your application, but really helpful if the people that you invite to write for you can also comment on these personal characteristics a little bit. And so that would lead us to people that know you well enough, right? That have worked with you maybe in more than one setting. And certainly it gets us outside of the classroom quite a bit as well. So we can open our minds quite a bit in terms of what, who could serve as a great recommender.
So, as we mentioned before, there are different types of recommendation requirements for the different types of awards. So, for the English teaching assistantship, they will ask for 3 recommendation forms that they will address specific questions about again, a lot about your personal characteristics and your teaching ability. But they're really looking for students who are able to overcome challenges, right? So if you're faced with something that is difficult, an obstacle gets in your way, you can demonstrate that that's not going to be a hindrance to you and you'll be able to overcome them. So think about perhaps situations you've been in with individuals, maybe in classes or in a work scenario where maybe you at first didn't do so well at something was very challenging. Maybe the first test you took with that professor, you didn't do so great on, but then you worked really hard, you addressed the specific problems and you overcame them. And that's a great way for the recommender to demonstrate that you have that kind of ability. You also want to have somebody who's able to talk about your ability to teach someone something. This doesn't have to be formal teaching experience. It could be any situation where you're just trying to get a person or a group of people to learn something new. Could be mentoring, could be coaching, it could be TAing, it could be lots of different ways. But again, you want the person who's writing that form to have observed you doing that and be able to speak directly to the great things they saw you do in that capacity. They're also interested in you as a person. Like, are you a nice person? Are you good at interacting with other people? Are you a jerk? Right? If you're a jerk, don't apply for this. And again, so you want someone who really does know you pretty well. If you don't have a professor or a supervisor that comes to mind that does know you pretty well, try to set aside some time to get to know that person. And again, we'll give you some advice on how to do that. Your ability to be flexible and adaptable without being given directions, working in unstructured environments, taking the initiative on your own are all great things you want this person to be able to talk about. Again, being a good representative of the United States, which doesn't necessarily mean you have to be hurrah, patriotic, yay, US is great, everything is wonderful here. But you do need to know how to engage diplomatically with people, to be open-minded and listen to them, and also convey something about your version of American culture. And you need to basically be mature and adaptable and flexible and have the experience that they're asking for in terms of being a teaching assistant. Remember, that's not the actual teacher, right? So in most cases, you do not have to be an expert in second language acquisition pedagogy, but you do have to know how to engage with folks in a way that gets them to learn something new.
So for study research, The approach is a little bit different, right? So with the ETAs, you're going to be, the referees are going to be completing a form, and for study research applications, we're talking about more traditional letters of recommendation. So that would generally be in the range of 1 to 2 pages. In that range, I think is ideal. Longer than 2 pages, people aren't going to read that much. 1 page, from an American might seem a little terse. But what the readers really need to hear from this letter is, do you have the ability to execute the proposed project? Do you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do this work? That'd be useful to know. What has been your intellectual, academic, and professional preparation? Can we describe some of the things that you've done and that they've seen, or their impression of you and your development? And what is their opinion of your ability to represent the United States positively abroad? And like Dr. Stoff pointed out, it doesn't mean that you need to drape yourself in the flag, but just if we were to send you abroad, would we be fine with that, right? Would I be fine with somebody in Romania meeting you and you be the first American they've ever met? And I think that's a really great litmus test, and that's something that actually our committees look for when we're writing endorsements of your application. Is like, do we feel great about you representing the United States, ASU, and us at ONSA specifically? I think another thing that helps is if the letter is able to comment on the relevance of the proposal, right? Because the people reading your applications at the national level, the National Screening Committee, they are familiar with this world region, or this specifically this country, but they may not be in the same discipline you are. And in fact, it's highly unlikely that they would be. And so it can be very useful, especially for more complicated or technical projects, for somebody who is an expert in that field to say, this project is highly relevant to the current discourse on this problem because of X, Y, and Z. And they can actually explain to this, yes, I'm familiar with who they're going to be working with, and they're, and really help sell, be an additional salesperson for this proposal, right? And there are specific requirements for this. It's already laid out on the website and in our instructions as well.
So we alluded to the folks who you should be asking for these kinds of references. So I'm going to go into a little more detail about that. Again, it really needs to be someone who knows you well. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, I go to ASU with another 160,000 students, and I've been in classes with, hundreds and hundreds of others, and my professors don't know me, outside of that context at all, and they barely even know me in that context because there's so many other students in the room. If you're worried about that, there are lots of ways for you to engage with folks who you've had classes with, who you enjoyed learning from, and that hopefully you did well with. And ASU actually has some really great advice for this about how to approach professors. This is our advice, is to reach out to them, indicate that you are going to be applying for a Fulbright, tell them how much that you enjoyed their classes and how much you admire their scholarship. Professors love flattery. And ask if you can set up a meeting so that they could get to know you a little bit better and see if this would be a good fit for them. So that's an important thing. And ASU has this great thing called Hey Sunny. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I'm putting this into the chat so that you can read it over about how to approach your professors if you haven't done it before, not to be afraid of going to their office hours. I know that sometimes professors seem like they're very scary and intimidating, but really we're all here to help you, even if we don't always seem like that in the classroom. We are not here to doom you to failure. We actually want you to succeed. And so going to office hours is a fantastic way to help the professors get to know you a little bit better. But you should also make sure you're asking people who can speak to the context. So again, when we were saying, if they're writing for the ETA, they should have some way to talk about your experience teaching someone something, right? So that's a really important component. For the ETA, it doesn't have to be all academics, right? You could ask a supervisor. In fact, you should have someone who's not an academic write for you. So again, a boss who watched you interact with other employees or watched you teach a new employee some skills. That's a really great person to ask for. That's the kind of relevant data that is important to share. Somebody who maybe has seen you interact with groups. I'm sure you've had a lot of classes where you were assigned group projects and the professors know about how you interacted with those other folks in your group. So those are really good people to ask. And of course, they have to be credible. So not your mom, not your friends, not anybody who is related to you, but somebody who was in some capacity, again, supervisory or in other ways in a position of authority that can speak, again, from that vantage point.
So the other layer of things to think about, as they're working on that letter is thinking about who can provide concrete detail and examples. So that's why that firsthand observation is helpful. And that's also why we discourage people from obtaining letters from impressive sounding people that maybe don't know you that well. I've seen many letters that came from the judge in my hometown who happens to be friends with my family, right? And that's great, but the National Screening Committee, who isn't from Oklahoma, doesn't know anything about this judge and doesn't know why they should be impressed. What they'd like to see is some firsthand observation from somebody who has a lot of experience with students and applicants and people that work in these academic areas. That yeah, this applicant is different. I want to show you why I think they're so great for Fulbright, right? And that enthusiasm and interest, somebody that's willing to go to bat for you. And a lot of times applicants will tell me, he's like, well, I guess I could ask my physics professor. He did say that he would write a letter for me. Should I ask him? I'm like, yes. It's not very often that faculty members actually go out of their way to offer a letter of recommendation before being asked, right? So if that has happened to you, you have impressed somebody, right? So keep in mind that is somebody who's already signaled to you that they would happily be in your corner and write with enthusiasm and interest. And it is helpful, as we warned at the beginning, to not necessarily recycle the letter for your med school application or for a job application or something like that, they can use that as the basis for a new letter. I certainly don't write a whole new letter every time one of my students asks me for another letter for another opportunity, but I do make sure that I'm using language that specifically speaks to this audience, right? And so we do have support and guidance for faculty as well.
So in general, when you're reaching out to folks to ask them for letters of recommendation, you should be reaching out to university level faculty members. High school teachers are too far removed, especially since you all are juniors or seniors now. And the committees are less interested in knowing about who you were in high school several years ago as what they're interested in learning about you in regard to who you are right now. It's also much more impressive to them to have faculty members from university level speak about you. It's also important to understand that the committees, the national screening committees, are made up of fellow university level faculty. So these are their peers, and they take their words fairly seriously. And so that's a good thing to note. One thing, however, you should understand is that there's a difference in culture between different countries when it comes to writing letters of recommendation. In the US, letters of recommendation tend to be very effusive, right? Kind of over the top in their enthusiasm about how wonderful the students are. And that's what the expectation is here. Whereas in other places, like for example, in the UK, faculty write very kind of flat letters. It's not because they think that the students are less worthy or less talented. It's just not part of the culture to be, as Americans, we're very kind of over the top in terms of our emotions. They don't write that way. If you have somebody from another country writing for you, you should try to give them an indication that this is what is the expectation. And if they don't feel comfortable doing that, then maybe think about somebody else to write for you. Again, you should make sure that it's people who have had you in class fairly recently or have supervised you fairly recently. I often have students who maybe took me in their first year and they come back 4 years later and say, can you write me a letter of recommendation for this? And I say, well, that would be fine if I knew what you had been doing for the last 3 years. It's not necessarily a deal breaker. I often just ask students to come and meet with me and then give me an update of what they have been doing and tell me why they're applying for the particular award that they're applying and how I can help them best. But it's a lot easier if you have somebody who you've been in class with much more recently than you have, not seen for 3 or 4 years. Especially with regard to the independent research and graduate degree program awards, it's really important to get somebody in the discipline that's relevant to that. So again, can speak to your ability to carry out your proposed research project or the graduate program you are going to attend. Titled faculty, people that have the title of professors are usually the best, but in this kind of changing landscape of academia, we understand that not everybody gets that title anymore. And in fact, it's increasingly more difficult to achieve that title. So it's not necessary to always have that, but if you can have at least one of your letters from somebody who has the title of professor in it, that is usually very helpful. We usually recommend not asking graduate students or postdocs. However, there are some exceptions to that too. Again, oftentimes postdocs and graduate students at the highest levels who are close to finishing their dissertations are often teaching classes as well, and can really, or if you worked in a lab with them, perhaps you were part of the Dodd-Rise program and you went to Germany and worked with a PhD student in a lab, they can usually speak to your abilities to carry out your proposed project. But again, we really want to make sure that you have at least 2 other letters from fully ranked university faculty members.
Now, for non-academic references, you got a lot more leeway, of course, but we do want them to be people of some kind of professional standing. All right, we don't want letters from peers. We don't want letters from family members, right? But some kind of title that puts them in a position that establishes credibility with this reader, meaning that they have worked with a lot of people, they're professional, they understand, how to evaluate talent when they see it, and they must have supervised you in some capacity, meaning that they were in a position to evaluate your work, to ask you to do things, and so on and so forth. For ETAs, not only should you have one non-academic reference, you're actually required that 1 out of 3 of your references be non-academic. When you see the actual reference form they use, you'll understand why they make that request, because many of these questions are actually challenging, may be challenging for faculty members to answer fully, because they may not have seen you in a leadership position, or they may not be able to assess whether or not that you'd be great at leading a class. They haven't seen you in a discussion class or something like that. So certainly great question to run bias. If you're not sure if this is a great choice for a reference, definitely ask us if you're unclear.
So as we've already mentioned, there are some people you should definitely not ask, right? For Fulbright, because you will be someone with a degree in hand by the time the program begins. A high school teacher is much far removed from your college experience, and you're obviously a very different person than you were when you were in high school. So best not to ask those folks. Do not ask friends. Do not ask family members, even if they are important people like judges or senators. Family friends also usually not a good idea. And please do not write it yourself. Even if your recommender says, I'd love to write for you, but I really just don't have the time. Can you write it up for me and I'll just sign it? Please resist that and politely explain to your recommender that that is really not kosher, right? That's not acceptable. Again, letters of recommendation should be confidential. What you can say in response to that is say, I can give you as much information as possible. I can give you lists of bullet points that I would like you to emphasize. I can give you my statement of grant purpose. I can make it as easy as possible for you to write it, but you need to write it yourself and submit it yourself, right? Because as Dr. Mock said, the Fulbright application will generate an email to the recommender and ask them themselves to submit it. You will never see it. So regardless, and again, this is also something that differs in different cultures. So there are some places where it's acceptable for people to write the letters of recommendation and have the faculty members just sign it. It is not acceptable here in the US. So please do have a conversation with that person that gently asks them to rethink that approach and give them as much information as possible to make their job as easy as possible.
Mm-hmm. And if that happens, I really encourage you to talk to one of us in ONSA. There might be some nuance to this conversation. I've gotten into conversations where it's like, well, no, the professor's like, well, no, I actually wasn't asking them to write the letter. I just asked them if they could, write a loose outline of the points they think I should emphasize, right? And that's helpful. That's being helpful to say, well, yeah, it would be real helpful if you talked about my working in a group in a lab, if you talked about my dedication to language study, and if you talked about my, interpersonal communication. and then gives some examples, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But we just don't want you writing the letter out of hand. And I've seen these letters, right, that students have written for themselves, and they're generally not good. So not just being unethical, it's also ineffective because you haven't written many letters of recommendation. You certainly haven't written any letters of recommendation for Fulbright, and you're probably going to drop a bunch of superlatives and things in there and not really have that correct voice, right? So there's a couple of good reasons not to do this. So we've emphasized, what we're looking for in these letters, one, credibility. That I think that's been pretty clear. Relevance too, right? And so maybe you had a great relationship with your calculus professor, but you're applying to be an ETA. And what exactly would this person have to say about your abilities in that area? Or you're trying to get a letter for a scientific for a STEM research project, and you're trying to get a letter from your human event teacher, right? We have to think, what could they say about me that's actually relevant to this conversation? I think if you play your cards right and do a good job engaging with faculty across the spectrum while you're at ASU or whatever school you're at, you have a few options for different situations, right? And so you can combine and mix and match, so to speak. And timeliness is important as well. As we pointed out, maybe, high school teachers obviously are a little too stale for this. I mentioned human event. A lot of Barrett students develop really strong relationships with their human event teachers, and this is a two-semester sequence that every Barrett student takes in their first year. You're going to develop a strong relationship with that faculty member, but by the time you're a senior and nothing else has been added to that relationship, perhaps that letter has gotten a bit stale as well. And one would wonder, wow, did this person peak in freshman year? Is there nothing that happened beyond this in their life that they could have produced a great letter of recommendation? But that being said, I've seen some wonderful letters from the human event faculty members or whoever taught your first year seminar because that relationship continued. Maybe they came back as a teaching assistant. Maybe they took another class from them. I strongly encourage all college students to take teachers and not take classes, meaning once you found a faculty member whose teaching works for you, whose personality you like, and you think it is supportive of your plans, try to take more classes with them. And that's the best way to get strong letters of recommendation because then they've seen you in multiple contexts.
So you might be asking yourself, well, how do I reach out to this faculty member? What do I say to them to get them to be willing to write for me? First thing is to do it well in advance. That is crucially important because faculty members and even people who are not faculty members, everyone is busy. Everyone has a lot on their plate. Faculty members in particular have at the end of the semester a variety of things that they are trying to juggle. So while we do want you to ask them now, because what tends to happen over the summer is they become sparse. It's very hard to track them down. Sometimes they don't answer emails, but they're probably not going to have time to write it now. What we really want is for you to get the commitment from them to write it, and then you will send them some gentle reminders as we get closer to the deadlines. And again, remember that for us internally, that deadline is September 9th. You will send them some friendly reminders just saying, hey, thank you again so much for agreeing to write for me. Just note that that deadline is September 9th, and I really appreciate you getting that in on time. When you're initially kind of reaching out to them, you kind of want to feel them out first, though. You don't want to just write, hey, can you write a letter of recommendation for me? You want to tell them what you're doing, right? You want to start with, hello, it's been, great taking this class with you or working in this research project with you. I'm so excited about, exploring this topic further. So start with like a little bit of flattery. Maybe you read an article or a book by that faculty member. Oh, I just finished reading your most recent article. It was really fascinating. I'm applying for a Fulbright, right? So make sure you tell them right away what you're doing, right? I'm about to graduate or I'm a rising senior and I'm thinking about my future. I'm wanting to apply for a Fulbright. It would be so wonderful if you could write a letter of recommendation for me based on our interactions, based on what you know about me from the classroom. Give them as much opportunity to say no as possible. And I know that kind of sounds icky, like, well, I don't want them to say no. But you really want the person who is enthusiastic about writing for you and feels confident about writing for you. And so you want to give them that out, right? If the person doesn't feel confident, it's actually does you a service to say, I'm really probably not the best person. I think you should probably try to find someone else. If, however, they do express that interest, like, oh, yes, I'd love to write for you, then give them all the information that they need, give them your statement of grant purpose, any other application materials, and again, remind them politely when the deadlines are coming.
And then the last tip I'd add to that, it doesn't end when you submit the application, right? Obviously, you want to show gratitude, a simple thank you note. Most people who work in my line of work have a place in their office where they store their hoard of thank you notes. That means a lot, to actually take some time out of your day, write a heartfelt handwritten thank you note, or just acknowledge the fact that, hey, you took some of your time, which is your most valuable resource, to help me out. I want you to know I appreciate that. If you want to, add to that, $5 Starbucks card goes a long way, or other more ethical coffee provider of your choice. So you don't have to buy gifts, but just actually acknowledging. The other great way to show gratitude is to keep them in the loop. All too often, we get emails from faculty members say, hey, whatever happened to Jane Smith's Fulbright application? Did she progress? I'm like, oh, yeah, she got it. Didn't she tell you? Let them know. Like, hey, just let you know, I've been moved up to semifinalist. Thank you so much once again. I'll let you know in April what I find out. That's a great way to keep that relationship and manage that relationship. And again, cultivate that relationship for down the road. I still maintain contact with several of my faculty members that have mentored me along the way. And every now and then I just check in because I'm actually genuinely curious of what's happening in their lives. And hey, I saw that you just had a new article out, just touch and base. And we do these little life updates, right? Because a lot of times it's come back around where I've then been invited to write letters in support of them for a teaching award or something like that. We just had a request in the office this week that one of our Fulbrighters, we're trying to track them down so they could write a letter of support for a faculty member, right? So it's an ever evolving circle. So keep them in the loop, show that gratitude. In terms of resources that we will provide you, we do provide what's called a memorandum of guidance, and we produce these for all of the major awards that we provide advising for, and it is a custom tailored letter from me, to the person that you've invited to write your letter of recommendation, and it lists the specific steps for submission, and it lists the campus deadline, and it gives some general guidance for what makes a great Fulbright letter as opposed to a something else letter. There is also guidance on the Fulbright site itself, right? And I'm not going to pretend like all of this knowledge came out of nowhere or we thought of it ourselves, but we've also added to it and interpreted it based on our own experience. And again, we are happy to provide guidance as well. I have had people send me their letters of recommendation well ahead of the deadline to say, I would love any guidance on this. I really want this student to win. Not everyone does that. Kind of, thank goodness I wouldn't have capacity for that. But we are happy to help faculty members or others improve their letters of recommendation because we've seen a lot of them, right? We understand what goes into a really great letter. And so let them know that we are here to help as well.
So now your next steps are to come to us to get that assistance that Dr. Mox was talking about. It's very easy to do that. Just go to our website, onsa.asu.edu. Sign up for an appointment with one of the advisors based on which type of award you are interested in. If you're still trying to just figure out which award is best for you, you can just pick anyone for an intake meeting and we'll help guide you through that process. But once you've decided, then you choose the award that you are most interested in, sign up for an appointment, and we will walk you through that whole process. We have a sort of 3-step initial process that we ask that you go through. The first is an intake meeting. The second is a getting ready to write, where we help you start on the most important components of the application, which is the statement of grant purpose and the short essay questions that they ask. And then we have drafting meeting just to make sure that you get that process going before the summer, because we really don't want you to lose that time and then be scrambling once we come back because you will be surprised how quickly September 9th will sneak up on you once fall semester begins.
Yeah. And again, you're going to avail yourself of several different resources throughout this. There are resources on the Fulbright site, of course, that where the basic information lives, where the award descriptions live, how you access the online application. We have our own site, which is specific to ASU, that will list our application timeline, FAQs, things like that. You can get to our YouTube channel through the events page on our website. You can schedule appointments, sign up for our weekly bulletin as well. Once you're into the process, once you're into our Canvas page, there'll be communications through that as well. And throughout the summer, we also host a number of other workshops and events, including our new favorite workshop, which are called simulations, where you get to play the role of a national screening committee member and evaluate a real live set of Fulbright applications. And it's been very illustrative and been quite popular with our applicants in the past. So thank you all very much. Thank you to Dr. Stoff for joining us today. Thank you for making the time to learn more about this. And if you're watching this on the recording, thanks for putting in the time there as well. We hope to see you in the office. And I'm happy to open it up for any questions that occurred to you along the way or are occurring to you now. The downside of Zoom is I can't tell if somebody's contemplating something. So, Cece, do you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question pertaining to what is considered a academic reference because I did an internship at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte, and it's like close to my like degree and all that is like related to criminal justice. And that supervisor was the head chair for the criminal justice department. So are they considered like an academic reference or no?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, just
Yeah.
making sure on that one.
Yeah, my simple definition is somebody who's taught you in a class or supervised you in a research setting, right? And so if there is an academic research component to that, yes. And that definition is helpful because then maybe we are in an internship where we were just doing administrative work and maybe the supervisor was a faculty member. Does that mean that's an academic reference? No, because the content of the letter isn't focused on academic tasks, right? So, but in your case, that definitely sounds like an academic reference.
Yeah, it was research. I just wanted to
Yep,
make sure on that one.
absolutely. And a common question we get too is like, does it have to be ASU faculty? No, 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 absolutely not, right? So if you're a graduate student or a transfer student at ASU, or like in this case, you went on a summer research experience or did something like that, it does not need to be ASU faculty members writing these letters.
Thank you.
Great, great question. Any others? All righty. Well, we know there will be some more. You just haven't thought of them yet. We can kind of predict what they're going to be, but I can't answer questions you haven't thought of yet. So we look forward to seeing you in either in the step 1 or step 2 meetings soon. If you're intending to apply in this cycle, feel free to reach out at any point if you have questions, either to myself or Dr. Stoff directly, or if you're not sure, you can just send it to ONSA at asu.edu, right? Yeah, let me pop mine in there as well. But yeah, thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend.